Welcome to Clarion West's Summer Craft Talk series. This year, in the absence of a 6-week workshop, we've asked our instructors to prepare a craft talk for our students and Write-a-thon participants. Tonight, I am thrilled to introduce you to Eileen Gunn. Eileen's short fiction is colored with mischievous humor, acerbic insight, and compassionate intelligence, as well as roller skating zoo escapees and gender-fluid Sasquatch. She has a penchant for taking the recognizable, historical figures, beloved characters, and distorting it just enough to show something completely new within. Her writing is weird, heartfelt, and utterly unique, not unlike the woman herself. Eileen has won the Nebula in the US and the Sense of Gender in Japan, and been nominated for pretty much everything else. She edited and published the magazine Infinite Matrix, and a Clarion graduate herself, she served on the board of directors for Clarion West for over 20 years. We're happy to have you with us tonight, Eileen.
Thank you, Tegan. Who's barking? I'm going to first make sure that you all have a way to take notes, because I'm going to be asking you to write things down at intervals in the talk. I guess the title of the talk is Woo the Muse of the Odd, which is a quote from Lafcadio Hearn, who's one of the odder writers of the late 19th century. And there were a lot of odd writers in the late 19th century. So I have read your submission manuscripts, and obviously you're all pretty competent writers already, and several of you are way more than competent. If you keep writing and paying attention to your writing, you will get better and better. And of course, you have a year to prepare for the actual workshop, by which time I'm confident you will be the most terrifying class ever. The part of your writing I want you to pay attention to at this point, and what I'll be talking about while you're becoming terrifying, is originality. And by originality, I don't mean simply not copying anyone else's stories. I mean developing work that comes from your own creative spirit, not from copying someone else's idea of what a story or a characterization or a plot outline or whatever should be. Some of you may do this already. Most of you probably do some of this. And some of you may think you're not supposed to do this yet. But I want to tell you all that you can and should, and that if you haven't, this is a great time to start. In order to do this creative act, this original act, you do have to first have an idea of what a conventional plot is, what a story arc is, how to create characters. I'm sorry, I'm getting a message that's blocking my screen. You get those ideas by not studying how to write a story, but by listening to stories and jokes being told, by telling them yourself, and later by reading other people's stories and jokes and creating your own. How many of you, when you grew up, told stories to your younger siblings? Most people who had younger siblings told them stories. And one of the jobs of being an older kid is to tell stories to the younger ones. So that's just natural storytelling. You already know how to tell stories. To be original, you have to go beyond the conventional rules, beyond the advice in Writer's Digest books, beyond tailoring your ideas to conform to what's normal. My parents were both artists, and my mother more than once gave me a piece of advice about the value of an education. She said, you need to learn the rules in order to choose which ones you want to break. And I think you guys know all the rules at this point from reading your stories. You know how to tell a story. You know how to create drama. You know how to create suspense. I think your Clarion West year should be dedicated, this year between now and when you actually get to Clarion West, should be dedicated to experimentation, to discovering which rules you want to break. And the way to do this, well, the way I do this, is by approaching every rule I'm given as one that I need to test by breaking it. So I urge you all to think about breaking all the rules that you know, and if you learn new rules, think about breaking them too. This makes me a difficult person to have as a student in class, and I'm hoping it will do the same for all of you. I want to start with delivering a short rant written by Bruce Sterling and excerpted from a much longer rant that he gave at a conference for computer game developers in 1990. This is the rant on being weird and strange in science fiction, and it applies to fantasy as well. It applies to real life. And I've conflated it to a much shorter rant, but this is the heart. Forget trying to pass for normal. Follow your geekdom. Embrace your nerditude. In the immortal words of Lafcadio Hearn, a geek of incredible obscurity whose work is in print after 100 years, woo the muse of the odd. You may be a geek. You may have geek written all over you. You should aim to be one geek they'll never forget. Don't aim to be civilized. Don't hope that straight people will keep you on as some kind of pet. To hell with them. You should fully realize what society has made of you and take a terrible revenge. Get weird. Get way weird. Get dangerously weird. Get sophisticatedly, thoroughly weird, and don't do halfway. Put every ounce of horsepower you have behind it. Don't become a well-rounded person. Well-rounded people are smooth and dull. Become a thoroughly spiky person. Grow spikes from every angle. Stick in their throats like a puffer fish. And that's how we got to where we are today in computer games. Now, this is a craft talk, but I think you're all very comfortable in your craft. These are good stories, and the ones that are finished are probably saleable. But there's more to life than saleable. And I'm confident that not only do you know that, but that's why you want to attend Clarion West, to get beyond saleable and to realize your own greatness. Greatness is rooted in originality. Once you've achieved a level of competence, you want to be different and better than other writers at your same level. So how, as you read and write more, do you maintain and improve your originality? I would argue that two of the components of originality, actually I added several more, so I think these are four components of originality, at least as defined in SF and fantasy field, are mystery, strangeness and weirdness, randomness, which both enhances strangeness and models real life, and intimacy or personal relevance. Not all of these things will work for each of you. Don't be distressed if some of it doesn't work or if it doesn't work the first few times. But make it a habit to think about these things as you write your fantastic fiction. And don't be afraid to reverse anything I say. Make everything terrifyingly normal, for example. Don't be weird. Get the curse of Bruce Sterling upon you. But find the strangeness and intimacy in the normal, in your own home and family. Look in your stories and find opportunities to make things strange. Workshopping as at Clarion West with the kind of group that you can develop with your Clarion cohort is an excellent way of testing stories, what works in a story and what doesn't. So you will have this, you have this group now, I understand you have coalesced as a cohort, and take advantage of that, because what that does is it frees you to try things out. It frees you to be weird. It frees you to put mysteries in the story that are never resolved. Your cohort in workshop will tell you whether it works or not. The sort of downside of workshopping is that it sometimes can be convergent rather than divergent. If the loudest voices in the workshop like a particular kind of story, the whole workshop can be pushed in that direction. And I think that has not really happened in the Clarion workshops. I've found it happens more in private workshops that have one or two leaders and everyone else kind of follows the leader. And I think that's actually dangerous to originality. But I think it's something to keep an eye on, but don't worry about it. Now, on a practical level, when you're plotting or planning a story, Don't just proceed with the first idea that comes to mind or the second, but don't reject them out of hand. Try combining them, expanding them, reversing them, using them as a jump off point to something very different, and then leap from there to someplace even stranger. I notice that some of you are retelling fairy stories, for instance, certainly a time-honored way of writing fantasy. And once you have a good story, and all your stories are good, try cranking it up a bit. Change the setting, change the characters, change the plot, twist it, bend it. Bent fairy tales are definitely have been a thing for, the last 150 years or so, but fairy tales are still a good medium to start with. Now, I want to give you I've lost track of my story. I want to talk to you about mystery for a minute. Mystery in a story is something that, in addition to being a mystery story, I'm not talking about mystery stories. I'm talking about adding something that's extra to your story, something that the reader never quite finds out. I think this is maybe it's intrigue more than mystery. Usually this is best done with a matter that's not significant to the plot or the entire, or else it is the entire meaning of the plot, that you don't find out what's going on. But I like to leave something in my stories for readers to wonder about. Like, how did this happen? How did that happen? Something that's not critical to the plot, but you don't want to knock them out of the plot. But the real world has lots of mysteries that you never find out the answers to. And I think stories should have a little something like that too. Now, I want to give you a prompt about mystery. So in this, I want you to think about a story that you're working on. And I assume that each of you is working on a story. What could you do? And this is for the part I want you to take notes. And this is not going to be done out loud. Just answer my questions on paper. And then you can look at it later and see if it makes any sense to you. In a story that you're working on, what could you do, in addition to everything you've already done in the story, to add mystery? Something that the reader never quite finds out. Usually this is best done with a matter, as I said, that's not significant to the story. And I'll time you for just like a minute and a half to think about the story you're working on and thinking if there's something that you can add to the story that would be just a little mysterious. Start. Okay, the time is up. The crickets say the time is up. Now I want to move on from mystery. Talk about making a story weird. Sometimes it's hard to add things to a story that's almost that's mostly done. But you can, if you start with the weird, if you start with stuff that's weird, it becomes an integral part of the story. One of the things I like personally about being a writer of weird stuff is that it rejiggers my idea of what's real. I have done a bunch of alternate history stories and stuff, and it really, I start thinking that the additions I've made to historical characters are the truth. And so you have to be kind of careful what you're making up, because it might stick with you for a while. Gibson and Sterling wrote a very strange book together, William Gibson and Bruce Sterling, called The Difference Engine. And it is about an alternate Japan and England and the US in the 19th century. And it really, really messes with your idea of history. I was a history major. I had to write a companion to it to put my history back the way it began. I wrote about a 10,000 word companion that's part of the Japanese edition. Just because it totally messed with my mind. And I encourage you to mess with your own mind that way. To give an example, I was working a couple of years ago with NASA scientists on a story, Night Shift is the title, that was commissioned to be about asteroid mining in the near future. And its ultimate purpose from NASA's point of view was to interest young people in studying science and technology. So it was supposed to be a hard science story. And after researching the subject, they assigned asteroid mining. And I researched it. You can find out a lot about asteroid mining. It was supposed to take place by 2025, 2030. They could be out there mining the asteroids. And there are people across the lake from me that are working on that. But I found the idea of asteroid mining as it will be done is really kind of insufficiently stimulating. It didn't involve any people on asteroids, for one thing. It's going to all be done by robots. So I started to think of what I could pull in from left field to shake things up. What am I interested in that's weird and strange, and how can I get it into this story? And I thought of slime molds. I really like slime molds. Some of you may also like slime molds. If you do, you know what I mean. They're fascinating. They're very simple, microscopic form of life. They're neither animal nor vegetable. They're their own category. And yet they move around and they make decisions collectively. This is really weird. They can determine the shortest, most efficient route through a maze to get a food source. And then they stick with it, ignoring all the false ways through the maze. And then they all go and eat up all the oatmeal till it's gone. So I thought of using slime mold decision trees implemented by nanobots to mine asteroids for useful materials. And I thought I'd get a lot of flack from NASA, but they actually took it seriously. I mean, they really took it seriously. They thanked me for exploring the concept. So get weird. Your weird stuff may turn out to be ideas for other people. In terms of getting weird, there are a lot of things you can do. You can trust your own personal weirdness, which is always good. But to simulate your own personal weirdness, read widely, lots of weird stuff, get as weird as you can personally. Take 2 or 3 ideas that are as far apart as you can imagine, but in which you have some interest, and smush them together. Like the nanobots, I spent a year in a nanobot research group, and slime molds, just because I love slime molds. So smush them together, see what you get. And I hadn't really thought about it, but until I started doing that nanobots and slime molds are not that different. Neither of them are quite alive in our sense. Yeah. The nanobots, I'm not sure how they would feed themselves, but they get energy. They do use energy. And so do slime molds. Anyway, don't censor yourself when you're creating. If possible, be as open to your own ideas and tell them down, put them down in words. Get as much down as you can of the story you're trying to tell. while you're trying to tell it in a strange way. Some stories unfurl while you're writing them. The time, and don't censor yourself. The time for creativity is at the beginning, and the time for rationality is later. Now, I would like to give you another short prompt about weirdness in the story that you're working on. What could you do? Think about it in context. What could you do in the story you're working on? One of the stories, if there's others, start at the beginning, the story that's shortest, that's closest to the beginning. What could you do in addition to all the weirdness that you've already put in there to make it just a little weirder? Just a little weirder. And I will give you a minute to think about that. Okay, the time is up. I hope you've sparked some weirdness. And now I want to talk about randomness. I like putting randomness into my work. And the way to grasp that randomness is basically, you can ask the I Ching questions. You can throw dice. You can throw darts at any book in your library and pull that out and pull something random out of that. You can look it up in the dictionary. You can just flip through a dictionary or an encyclopedia or online. It's harder online because you can't flip through things. But don't think about it. Just find words or ideas or concepts or history or characters that interest you. And find a couple of them, not just one. And then let your natural, innate human ability to associate things, to make patterns, to make connections, to make meaning between unrelated things, put that to work. It's called apophenia. And it's the ability to metaphorize everything. It's a natural human thing. It's related to pareidolia, which is a tendency to see faces and things, like to see that face on Mars. You can see faces all around you if you look for them in doorways and houses and signs on the street. That tendency to pull connections out. Trust apophenia to work in your story. Your brain will make it work. So pulling random ideas together. And now I would like to give you a prompt about that randomness for the story that you're working on, any story that you're working on. Think about where in that story there's a setting, a description, plot, or character points that you could add random details that are unconnected to the plot. You may find as you continue writing that they're not so random at all, that they fit together. And I will give you about a minute to think about that. Just think about where you could pull random ideas and just toss them in the story. Okay, we've talked about mystery, we've talked about weirdness, we've talked about randomness, and now I want to talk about the thing that will pull this all together. This is one of the things that helps you make your work genuinely original. And that's intimacy. That's putting yourself in your work in some way. And I don't mean putting yourself in as a character, though that's perfectly okay. I mean details. Pull details from your own life. Pull your own attitudes and your own personality and invest the story with them. It may seem, if you're doing original work, it may seem familiar to you as you write it. And that's one of the reasons why I think calling it intimacy works. It's something that's close to you. And I didn't understand that until I went to Clarion. And my first couple of stories were very distant from me. There was nothing terribly wrong with them. One of them got published. My first published story was written before I went to Clarion. But they're not that much of what I think or who I am. And once I started connecting with the stories in that way, I think my writing became much more original. It was less modeling other people and more using my own self in them. As a writer, you're first of all a reader and a listener, so much of what you write will be based on what you've heard and what you've read, and that's fine. But it shows that you have some connection to reality, for one thing, and you can and should use that reality in your stories. But if you're, for instance, the intimacy, if you're writing about children, use your real childhood, not some manufactured childhood, not a childhood modeled on children in books you've read, no matter how authentic that seemed. But you find details in your own childhood to give to those children. If you're writing about death, think about how you connect to death, even if what you're writing is a shoot 'em up. You're killing, think about all those characters you're offing so carelessly. And then tap into your own intimate life and your own choices and interests. You don't have to make it about you. Your experience is universal. You put it into your story and people will respond to its reality, to its realness. And put it into your weird story. Make your mysteries that kind of thing, your slight mystery things in your stories. Make your weirdness in your stories your own weirdness. We're all weird. Everybody's weird. We were taught growing up not to be weird, and society kind of compresses our weirdness. But we all have weirdness to tap into. And the fact that you're all writing fantastic stories indicates that you respond to that weirdness in yourself and in your material. So I'd like to do a prompt now about intimacy. In the story that you're working on, what could you do in addition to everything you've already done to make the story more relevant to you, yourself, you as a person, someone with a history, a set of habits, a way of speaking or thinking or dressing or whatever? Can you put a little bit more of yourself into a character? Can you use some details from your personal experience, your family background, your childhood, and see where this takes the story? Okay, I will give you a minute and a half to think about that and take notes if that occurs to you. Okay, your minute and a half is up. Now I want to talk about creativity, which is where you're going to be getting all of these weird and mysterious and personal details. You should trust your creativity. Everyone is creative. Everyone is. Animals are creative. There's been studies with primates, studies with crows. They invent things, and they may even tell themselves stories. That's a little unclear, but creativity is inherent in you. If you're worried about it, don't worry. Just find it. Now, how do you prime the pump of creativity? How do you get it started if you're feeling at loose ends or down or whatever? Read something good. Read something weird. Listen to some surreal comedy albums. Watch stuff on YouTube. Read surrealist writers, though I find them harder to read the genuine surrealists. A bit hard, but the prompt I gave you earlier this week is artwork by a surrealist painter. Sometimes surrealist painters are working with realistic images, and she does, and just a remarkable painter. I hope that they jump-started something for you. Read poetry. Read widely in fantastic literature. Read Kafka. Read Lafcadio Hearn. You probably already do. Most of you seem to have excellent either self-education or formal education. But go to these people for your ideas. If you're feeling that you don't have any ideas, go there and then jump off of them, leap off of them. Don't do what they did, but let your mind take off. explore the weird and strange stories all over the world. The world is filled with these stories. If you have, you know, a non-English language knowledge, read the stories in those languages. Read if your ethnic background is from outside the U.S. or outside the English-speaking world. Get into your own the strange stories, the weird stories. Every culture has them. Read comics. I personally am a fan of comics from the turn of the 20th century. Winsor McCay, Little Nemo comics, and George Harriman's Crazy Cat. Both of them are very surreal and strange, and you can leap off pretty much anything they do into a mood that will create a story. I'm also reading Julius Lester's Uncle Remus tales, which are remarkable. Julius Lester is a remarkable writer, and he retells these tales in kind of takes the sentimentality out of them, takes any of the racist tropes that one thinks of when one thinks of Uncle Remus tales. He removes them and he makes them, puts them back into being stories that Black people would tell one another in the 19th century. Takes them back to even to African tales, but he definitely places them in the South in the 19th century. He's a remarkable writer. And then watch movies by Jordan Peele, who marries suspense and horror and normalcy extremely well. And jump off from Jordan Peele. I'm not a horror writer. I've written 1 or 2 horror stories, but they keep me up all night. I don't like things that scare me. So leap from Jordan Peele into writing something that's not Jordan Peele. Read some of the stranger English language writers in fantasy and science fiction to see what can be done. Avram Davidson is someone that everyone should read. Very prolific short story writer who died about 30 years ago, I think. Remarkable writer. He traveled around the world. He absorbed cultural, it just absorbed the beauty of other cultures and put it all into his writing. He loved history. He loved the strangeness of the human mind. Great writer to read, Avram Davidson. I can give you lists of other writers, but jumpstart your imagination and make yourself comfortable with being weird by reading other weird writers. And then I want to counsel you to trust yourself. In addition to the creative writing, you probably do a lot of other things that are creative, and you probably are inventive with your things to do with your kids, if you have them, with your friends. There's all different ways of being creative. And if you're stumped in some way, go do it. Go be creative in some other way. Gardening is a good thing to do. Just rearranging the stones in the garden can be a lot of work. And when you're done, you think, I have an idea for a story now. And there are a lot of forces out in the writing advice wilderness that I want to warn you about, that will tell you you have to follow certain plot outlines, or that you have to have a certain story arc, or that you have to have certain types of characters. This kind of advice is particularly popular in genre categories, in fantasy, science fiction, romance, etc. In fact, there are all sorts of rubrics for creating fiction by balancing various cliches. I actually have a book from the 1920s that tells you how to write a science fiction story with a wheel. The book has a little wheel in it, and you turn it for different character types. It's a complete different plot outlines. It's dreadful. It's genuinely dreadful. And it's an example of how to misuse these books. Don't follow leaders, watch your parking meters, as Dylan says. That use your ability to think divergently, to break off from what they tell you, to say, no, how do I break this? How do I, but listen to what they're saying. I actually, when I first started writing fiction for real, I went to the library and I took out 35 books on how to write fiction. And 33 of them were dreadful, but I got 2 books out of it that were saying something that I needed to hear. And I think sometimes these series or approaches to creativity, the story arcs and so forth, are very useful after you've written something. If your story is not moving in some way, yeah, looking at how the arc of the characters work, how their action rises and falls, can be useful. But don't take them as hard and fast rules. Now, I'm finishing up here, and I'm finishing up a good bit faster than I thought I had. So I'm not going to wing it. I'm just going to say my final message to you, which is trust your brain. Trust your brain to make sense of your story. If you're writing yourself into a corner, trust yourself to get out of it. You'll get out of it. The harder it is to figure out what you're doing, the better a story will be in the end, I think. I know people that are actually effortless writers, and they write excellent stories. So if you write excellent stories without much effort, more power to you. But people like myself who agonize over the stupid stories forever, they need to trust their brain. Put as much mystery, strangeness, randomness, and intimacy into your story as you can handle right from the beginning. Use your conscious brain to make sense of it, and let your subconscious handle the relationship between the different elements. Apophenia here, your ability to associate different things, is your friend. Having read your work already, I'm confident that each of you has the possibility of being an original writer and becoming a great writer. Go for it.